Welcome to this week's edition of Good Books Radio. I'm your host, Dr. W.F. Strong, and we have a great interview lined up today. In fact, we have Erik Prince standing by on the phone. He is the founder and former CEO of Blackwater, Inc. You probably remember Blackwater from the Iraq War in particular. They were both famous and infamous for their activities there. Erik Prince has written a New York Times best-selling book called Civilian Warriors. And in this book, he says that he is trying to set the record straight. He thinks that Blackwater got a bad rap, and he was, because of security regulations, unable to properly defend his company. He sold it about 4 years ago, so he's no longer president. He's still in security services around the world and is one of the leading experts in the world on security. Erik Prince is a fascinating guy. He is himself a Navy SEAL, and he has a kind of interesting background because he comes from a fairly wealthy family, which allowed him to create Blackwater. And so we're going to talk to him not only about the legacy of this company and the defense that he wishes to make for it, but we're also going to talk to him about current geopolitics, particularly between the Muslim and Christian worlds. The Washington Post said of this book, "We need Prince's story to help us understand the history of the post-9/11 wars and the myriad of roles contractors played in these conflicts." So let's get Mr. Prince's side of this story that he so much wants to tell. We'll go to him now. I wanted to begin with a kind of geopolitical question. Instead of starting with Blackwater, I want to start with where you are today and kind of, go backwards. The question I have is a lot of people who think that we're on the verge of a kind of new crusades, a worldwide war between Muslims and Christians. What do you say to such an idea?
I don't think we're at we're not at a clash. We're not pending any clash between Christianity and Islam. I would say it's a clash between civilization and a rabid horde. Okay, and they, ISIS hates other Sunnis and Shia as much as they hate Christians. Mm-hmm. So this is not a Christian versus Islam fight. Again, this is civilization. This is like rabid dogs terrorizing any population where they operate. Even the way that just 2 days ago they lined up and executed 100 or 250 Sunni tribes members. Okay, now those are people of the same ethnicity, the same religion even, but they operate, and we would view it as utterly mindless and can't imagine why they're doing it. But ISIS has a reason they do it, and that is to strike terror into anyone that lifts a finger against them. It is a very deliberate strategy by them to terrorize their opponents, and that's why much of the Iraqi army in the north of Iraq melted 4 months ago, and in doing so surrendered 5 heavy divisions of equipment and 3 major logistics bases worth of munitions and supplies to support ISIS. Now, really, they have enough weaponry to fight for years to come.
What do you think we should be doing as a country? I know, obviously we're bombing, but it doesn't seem to be doing a great deal of good. The challenge is it's not just a matter of going and crushing ISIS, but you have to let the Sunnis in that region feel comfortable enough with the Baghdad government, who's really been sticking it to them for the last 5 or 6 years. The ultimate disenfranchised voter, and they let ISIS roll through there because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yes. Is what they figured. And it's not just the other Sunni nations in that area view Assad as the major recruiter for ISIS, and so the sad thing is America had won in Iraq. It was peaceful, it was stabilized, and really, the State Department letting Maliki stay on unopposed. He lost the election 4 years ago, but he managed to stay on through bluff and intimidation and Iranian power and money, and it really caused this whole thing to come apart. I don't know that Iraq will stay together as
as a contiguous country the way it is. I think there'll be much greater autonomy. But you know what? Most Shia, most Sunnis, and the Kurds would like to live in peace and get on with their lives and farm and send their kids to school and maybe get an oil dividend check once a year. They're not all crazy. There is a segment of society there that has gone off the deep end, and some organization is going to have to suppress them because they will continue to kill and burn and pillage. I mean, these guys, ISIS has even captured hundreds of Stinger missiles and Hellfire missiles now. Brand new U.S. stuff. And they raided a resupply column moving between Kuwait and Baghdad. So they have money, they have weapons, they have a very radicalized recruiting base. ISIS flows very well from being a small footprint terrorism outfit that does roadside bombings and assassinations up to massing their forces to be able to do company size and even battalion size military operations.
Well, something that shocks me in all of this is that we have a good number of women from U.S. and from England who somehow see this as romantic and are flocking to join ISIS, to become sex slaves or something. I don't know what is in their heads.
I can't imagine. There's always, I guess, mentally ill people that want to go join something crazy. I would imagine that if you interviewed those people 4 or 5 months into their experience, they would realize the error of their ways.
I bet. Well, I'm talking to you from half a mile away from the Mexican border, where the famous fence is, the wall they call it. It's really a fence. And there's a lot of people who worry that ISIS and other sorts of radical Muslims will slip into the U.S. via that rather porous border. Do you think that's something to worry about?
I think that's a very real possibility. I think whether it's coming across in onesie twosies or even motivating the numerous lone wolf type attackers. We don't want to live in a society where that is impossible to do. Meaning, we don't want to live in a North Korea style maximum police state. I think it's important to degrade or annihilate ISIS capability wherever they are. But I also think as Americans we have to be careful to not trade our liberty for security or for the illusion of security.
Yeah, the famous Benjamin Franklin line, right?
I think that could be.
I think it comes from Franklin, but I'll have to check. But anyway, you don't trade your. And then Churchill said it also, I believe.
And we have been, and whether we allow blanket government surveillance of our communications to the financial impediments. There's just so many things that government says, oh, we need this to protect you, we need this to protect you, and it is rife for abuse. It is being abused now, and I would rather America needs to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, not the we don't want to live in a hyper police state or have or particularly have overly militarized police as well.
Actually, I'm a little shocked to hear you say that. I would have expected you would have been for maximum security, given your background. But so it's encouraging. I'm a libertarian. I see. When I started Blackwater, I did it coming out of the SEAL teams. No one, the SEAL teams had used private facilities since the 1970s, and no one had done it on an industrial scale. So I built a training facility, hired some great guys to run it, and we had very much a SEAL special operations culture, blended with good business practices from like an MBA financial controls perspective. It's fascinating.
And we grew because we served our customer. We saw a need and we served it. So we built a high school to train policemen how to solve an active shooter problem, like after Columbine. And then we trained the Navy, almost 100,000 sailors after the Cole was blown up. In that case, the Navy had optimized to fight at 100 miles, not at 100 meters. And the sailors that were guarding the ship that day were holding unloaded weapons that they hardly ever fired before. So, again, we're a service organization. We serve our customers. When 9/11 happens, they get pulled over to help with training and security and aviation support and all those kind of things in difficult places. And the point I wanted to make with the book is not only just to debunk the myths about Blackwater, but also let the reader know that the private sector has been interwoven into the national security space really since the founding of the country. So as people sit down to have Thanksgiving dinner, we have to remember that it was a contractor like John Smith or Miles Standish that helped build those original colonies into what became the states. On through the American Revolution and up to the present, the private sector, because it has to pay attention to price, because we're not a line item in the budget, we have to know what things cost. We can provide the decision makers with a more cost-effective, narrowly focused, smaller footprint capability. And if you need an extra car for the weekend or the week, you rent one, right? You spool it up, you use it, and then you wind it down, and there's no legacy cost. The private sector can fill those gaps temporarily as well.
Well, give me a list of the things that Blackwater did. I mean, that most people are aware of providing security for Brenner in Iraq and those sort of things, but you have a much broader reach that I was unaware of until I read your book. Yeah, no, we started as a training operation. The first classified thing we did is we showed the Coast Guard how to stop drug boats with a sniper rifle from a helicopter. And I throw that in as an oddity. That was our first classified program, exposed by 60 Minutes. And then we did a lot of training extensively, and then we did security, both personal security and facility security. We did construction. Our aviation arm grew very quickly, growing to 73 aircraft that we owned and operated, both fixed and rotary wing. Wow, you were an Air Force. Resupply. we had, but it was the cheap, muddy boot Air Force, meaning generally we landed on unimproved, rough fields. And there's a couple of really good rescue stories in the book. I encourage people to read it. But filling that gap, because the U.S. Air Force had beautiful C-130s and C-17s. Those are $100 million to $280 million airplanes. But you needed a simple, rugged, $2 million aircraft that could land on that gravel strip on the side of a mountain in Afghanistan. That's what we rushed in to fill that void. When I first heard the name of your company, Blackwater, I thought that it stood for like Black Ops. And then when I was reading your book, I came across your experience as a rescue diver, and you said that when you were in deep water, Blackwater, it focused your mind. And I said, oh, that's where the name comes from. But then, no, it's something less metaphorical. So how'd the name come about?
And we didn't hire some high dollar marketing firm to come up with the name. The Blackwater compound was flat. It is as flat as your kitchen table, and so there was ditches, and we had to put some culverts in. And as we're in the ditches, our legs are literally getting dyed black from the peat. Okay, so you have organic soil. The rain goes through the soil. By the time it makes it to the ditch, it is black. So very simple. And the logo came because we had to put about 3.5 miles worth of power poles in. And within days of us putting those poles up, the bears were coming out of the woods and ripping their claw marks, leaving their mark on those poles. And the bigger the bear, the higher up he could reach. And so the logo came from the bear paw, and the name came from the water in the ditches. And it was basically, a bunch of guys over pizza and beer came up with the name.
And you were how old at that time? 24, 5?
I was 25 or 26.
It's a very young guy to start such an international enterprise.
I've had the habit of finding people much smarter than me, and they were a great team. I would have put them against any management team in America.
I want to ask you this: how did it come? You're a Navy SEAL, and when I was a kid, the premier special force was the Green Berets, and John Wayne, and you always saw the Green Beret, At what point did the Navy SEALs take over that legacy, so to speak?
Well, look. The special operations community in America is a phenomenal group of people, whether it's the TF-160 guys flying the Army helicopters, or the Ranger units, or the Army Special Forces of the Navy. The SEALs got some notoriety from some great events and some tragedies. So these things happen. I would say the special operations community writ large takes people that have a very much a can-do ability, and they just don't know what quit is. Mm-hmm. And they will push and extend and exert themselves. And when I went through BUDS, they told us that your body is capable of about 10 times what you think it is. Wow. And then they prove it to you, and they push you, and they crush you, and they really show you how deep you can go in pushing yourself. And that's a phenomenal life experience. And I think it's the reason that community, after those guys get out, they do other interesting, different things, because it's a heck of an education to come from.
What was the toughest thing about your Navy SEAL challenge when you qualified? What was the hardest thing for you?
Well, I was married when I went through BUDS, and I had a very social wife, and she actually taught at a local Catholic school. And so she would have the teachers over and the nuns over, and they'd be having a dinner party at 10 o'clock at night, and I would literally be falling asleep in my food because I had to get up at 4 o'clock the next morning and still shine my boots and sharpen my knife and all those things. And so I would say my wife was wonderful. She was a great cook, very social, but she about killed me with the socializing. So.
How interesting. Well, in your book, you say, right here on the back jacket, I'll read this for everybody, you said, "I'm done being quiet. I'm done keeping quiet. What's been said before is only half the story about Blackwater, and I won't sit idly by while the bureaucrats go after me so that everyone else can just go back to business as usual." So what's the main thing that you want people to understand in this book?
I wrote the book to dispel those myths, and that the company was a bunch of out of control, malcontents. That I want people to realize that we were veterans. We, the leadership, I'm a veteran, the owner, that we hired veterans, U.S. military and law enforcement veterans that had served their country well already, volunteered once, and they volunteered to go back again to serve their country in a difficult, dangerous place. They operated with very clear rules of engagement dictated by the U.S. government. It's not something we just made up. That they were paid a fair wage. They weren't paid this ridiculous, overinflated salary that people imagine. Our guys were paid a daily wage, and when they left the hot zone, their pay went to zero, and they still had to pay their own insurance and housing and food and everything else. And so really, if you do an apples-to-apples comparison, as has been done by a number of the think tanks, they realize, the private sector is paying a competitive wage, but not not an out-of-market one. That's the thing. When General Westmoreland, he was the chief of staff of the Army in 1972 or in the early 70s, and when they were switching from a all-draft army to a volunteer army, he said, "I do not want to serve or lead an army of mercenaries." That's what he described the U.S. Army as one that was going to be paid a fair wage for the job they were doing. And Milton Friedman's response to him was, "Well, sir, if you don't want to lead an army of mercenaries, then I don't want to be served by a mercenary lawyer or accountant or butcher or barber, because we in America, you're either going to be paid a fair wage and a free exchange of goods and services, or are you a slave?" So that's I think a very valid argument. So these people that throw around the mercenary term or whatever, and even the mercenary term, if people really have an objection to mercenaries, then they probably need to start taking a bulldozer to some monuments in Washington, because there are some very key mercenaries that came and built America and fought side by side with the Patriots in the American War of Independence and War of 1812.
A lot of people don't know that.
Across the street from Lafayette Park, you have Lafayette, Rochambeau, and Steuben, Kosciuszko, mercenaries, contractors that came and built the Continental Army. Von Steuben was the first Inspector General, a Prussian. Kosciuszko, a Pole, the founder of American artillery. There's a 30-foot tall statue of him at West Point. And, of course, Lafayette and Rochambeau, French battlefield commanders for General Washington. So I wrote the book to dispel myths, hopefully to end some ignorance on this topic, and I think I accomplished my goal there, because even people that very much didn't like the company, didn't like what contractors are and do, came away from that educated and say, "Aha, I now understand the role you play and why you did it, and I'm I'm convinced.
Well, I like what John Stewart, who is no rabid conservative.
No, certainly not.
John Stewart on the back of the book jacket, he says, "You should read this because we have preconceived notions about what this force is and what it means to the U.S., and it's important to get the view of an individual who experienced it and dealt with it." In other words, he's saying, open your mind and listen to this man, because he has a point of view that's going to be enlightening. And I found it absolutely true. In fact, one of the things that I was, when I first heard about Blackwater, for instance, during the Iraq War being the primary security force for Brenner, I had this reaction. I'm sure a lot of people did. I said, don't we have special forces that can do that are already in the military, who can give him security? Don't we have that? And the book helps me understand, the role that you play.
Sure. And it's important to even answer that question right now. Mm-hmm. Of course there were special forces that could have been doing that job, but if they were doing that job protecting Bremer, they couldn't be out hunting Al-Qaeda guys. Mm-hmm. So what is their highest and best use? Okay, of course, it's hunting insurgents. Let contractors fill a less interesting job and provide bodyguard services.
And you never lost a person. That's something I found fascinating. I didn't know that.
We had more than 100,000 missions, and no one under our care was ever killed or injured. 41 of our men were killed in action, and killed by everything from roadside bombs and ambushes to sniper shots to surface-to-air missiles, even taking down our aircraft. So we operated in difficult, dangerous places, and
that's an amazing record, given where you operate and the kind of security you have to provide. What happened in Benghazi? What went wrong, in your opinion?
Blackwater wasn't there.
I know it wasn't. So, and I know it's easy to. If
Blackwater was there, I think it would have ended differently. Fortunately, there were a couple of contractors that did answer the call and actually didn't listen to their CIA bureaucrat base chief in Benghazi, and they moved to the sound of the guns. And in doing so, saved a lot of State Department lives. Look, the State Department depended on some local, unvetted Libyan security, which turned coats, and let through a very pre-planned, radicalized Islamic assault. Some radical Islamists like Belhaj and the rest of those guys going after, trying to kill Americans that day on September 11, 2012, and they were successful. The diplomatic security agents that were charged with protecting the U.S. ambassador did not succeed in their mission at all.
Do you think we could have gotten assets there to help? Because that's always the argument. We didn't have anything in place,
absolutely.
And everything was too far away. We couldn't get there.
No, it was a hesitancy by the National Command Authority to commit assets, whether it was some helicopters with some special operations guys from Tripoli that could have flown in. There was a C-130 full of special forces guys in Croatia on the aircraft, blades turning, ready to launch, told to stand down by the National Command Authority, and there was even an aircraft carrier in the area that could have done low passes with F-18s. I mean, look, an F-18 going 500 knots at about 500 feet over the city has a bit of a conversion effect on people's attitude.
Yeah, I imagine. What's the best military book you've ever read?
Boy, I like To Dare and to Conquer by Derek Liebhardt.
I don't know
that. And it's a fantastic book on kind of the outsized effects that special operations troops, and it really predates even special operations troops, and call it a handful of picked men. Whether it's Alexander the Great climbing a mountaintop fortress to clear the way in an early campaign, or you name it, places that soft forces have made a very outsized effect on the battlefield.
I'm going to read that. That sounds fascinating.
To Dare and to Conquer.
And one more.
So read that after you read Civilian Warriors.
Oh, well, I've read Civilian Warriors and I loved it.
Good.
The other thing I was going to ask you about. Oh yes, what movie, in your mind, is the most realistic depiction of war?
Boy, the combat scenes of. Look, I've never participated in a Normandy beach style landing, but what I'm told is that it's an amazingly realistic depiction, and I can't even imagine. I've been to Normandy, I've been to Omaha Beach, I've walked those areas. I can't imagine what that was like to be shot at from 3 directions, with pre-planned enemy fires. It's what an awful experience.
Lone Survivor, I've heard people say that movie fairly depicts the disorientation of a firefight. I don't know if you saw that movie.
I did. I don't know the accuracy of how the firefight was depicted. I mean, Hollywood always has to put some the interest factors in. So I don't know. I haven't read the entire Lone Survivor book, so I don't know how it compares to what the book described, or how the firefight was.
Well, the book was a real page turner, as is yours, because you go through several missions, and it's a very dramatic telling. But Lone Survivor was like that also. And when I first read the book, it was staying up till 4 to find out what happens. And the only thing about the movie that I found probably overdone was these people were falling onto granite rock from some distance flat on their back, and I just don't think people get up from that. I may be surprised.
I guess
I'm willing to be surprised.
Another phrase I remember from the SEAL teams is that mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. So. Maybe
so. Well, listen, thanks a lot for joining us today. I really appreciate the conversation, and I want to highly recommend this book, a good Christmas read, Civilian Warriors by Erik Prince, the inside story of Blackwater and the unsung heroes of the War on Terror. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks very much, sir.
The book, once again, is called Civilian Warriors by Erik Prince. It's a New York Times best-selling book by the founder and former CEO of Blackwater, Inc. I want to make sure to thank our underwriter, audiobooks.com, for supporting Good Books Radio. I want also to remind you that you can listen to this interview again on our Facebook page, where you can like us, or you can go to our YouTube channel and you can listen to it there as well. For Good Books Radio and audiobooks.com, I'm Dr. W.F. Strong. Here's hoping that all your books will be good reads.